The Archer's Ring was once one of RuneScape's most sought-after items, until in only a few hours, it plummeted from over 1 million coins to just 5,000, losing 99% of its value overnight. The community panicked, theories ran wild, and Jagex stayed quiet. But when they broke their silence, players were furious with their explanation. This is the incredible rise, fall, and rise again of the Archer's Ring. Our story begins all the way back on November 7th, 2005, when RuneScape's newest bosses, the Dagannoth Kings, had just released. Although they were only announced a few days prior, these bosses were highly anticipated, mainly because Jagex hinted that they may drop a brand new piece of dragon equipment. Anyone playing back then knows that dragon equipment was a big deal. It was the Gucci of Gielinor. One glimpse and everyone knew you had tons of GP and high stats. Nowadays, full dragon is less high-level warrior and more credit card warrior. But back on topic, whatever this new piece of dragon equipment was going to be, it wouldn't be easy to get. Players would quickly learn that finding the Dagannoth King's lair was half of the battle. Jagex decided to place it at the end of this massive labyrinth, full of high-level monsters. So not only would you need to find the right path, you'd have to hope that you had enough supplies to take on the kings at the end. Now, because these bosses were brand new, nobody knew how to fight them. The main strategy was bring your best melee gear, pray protect from missiles, go with a lot of people, and just hope you don't die. Some wealthier players would even bring along cannons to try and increase their damage per second even further. But like every new piece of content that releases, as the days went by, players learned more and more about how to do it correctly. Like how each king is weak to a different combat style, so bringing more than just melee gear was a good idea. Each king also attacks with a different combat style, so you shouldn't just camp protect from missiles. And fighting the kings one by one is much better than pissing them all off at the same time with a cannon. The biggest discovery, however, was that you can safe spot Dagannoth Rex. Rex is the king that attacks with melee, and because of the way the layer is built, you can trap him on the sides of it and slowly mage him to death from a distance. When the Dagannoth Kings first released, Jagex hadn't quite figured out how to make NPCs move diagonally. So instead of Rex just going right at you like he does today, he would do this awkward side shuffle all the way south and then try to come at you. Now, what about that piece of dragon equipment that Jagex teased? It ended up being the Dragon Axe, which was actually a huge disappointment for a number of reasons. First of all, its stats at the time were exactly the same as the Rune Axe. Both required 41 woodcutting to use and chopped logs at the same exact speed. I have no idea who decided that this was even remotely a good idea, but it gets worse. Today, the Dragon Axe's special attack on old school RuneScape temporarily boosts your woodcutting level by 3. Back then, it would just temporarily lower your opponent's magic and defense levels by 10%. But most upsetting of all was that it wasn't a new piece of dragon armor or a weapon. I mean, technically it could be used as a weapon, but even with that special attack, it just wasn't worth it. Players were expecting such difficult bosses to drop something cooler, like a dragon plate body or warhammer, but they'd have to wait a few more years for those. Overall, many players thought that the Dragon Axe was ruining the coolness of dragon equipment. One player named Omega Comics described his hatred for the axe like this: dragon weapons and armor are meant to strike fear into an opponent. Now that's all gone to hell with pansy woodcutters using a dragon axe to chop wood. He's being just a little ridiculous, but in a way, he's not completely wrong. Dragon equipment morphing from late game boss killing gear that you'd sell your soul to get to a reskinned rune axe is kind of tragic. As a result, the real drops players chased from these bosses were their new unique rings. The Berserker and Warrior rings provide boosts to your melee stats. The Seer's ring provides a boost to your magic stats, and the ring we'll be focusing on the rest of the video, the Archer's ring, provides a boost to your range stats. Although the bonuses they provide aren't super crazy, they became the new best in slot for all combat styles for years to come. In 2009, the rings would get a pretty huge buff. If you earned enough points in the then newly released minigame Mobilizing Armies, may it rest in peace, you could imbue your rings, which would dramatically increase their bonuses and thus their demand. Fast forwarding to early 2014, and every ring was still desirable. Despite their age, imbuing had kept them relevant, and although they were no longer best in slot, they were still very powerful. At the time, the Archer's Ring was trading for over $1 million gold, making it the most expensive of all of the DK's rings for now. One tiny mistake was about to make it completely worthless, and nobody had any idea. But first, let's discuss Manscaped's newest grooming game changer, the Beard and Balls bundle, featuring the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra and the Beard Hedger, the perfect duo for your face and below the waist. Let's start with the star of the show, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. It's a powerhouse packed with features designed to give you the ultimate grooming experience. It has two interchangeable skin-safe blade heads, longer, wider, and rounded teeth that's tough on hair yet gentle on skin. It's wireless, has a dual spotlight so you can actually see what you're doing, and it's even waterproof, so you can use it in the shower. If you love all that, you'll really love the Beard Hedger, featuring a titanium-coated stainless steel T-blade, 20 different length options, and the same waterproof capability as its counterpart. This thing is a beast. It comes with everything you'll need to up your grooming game, whether you're at home or on the go. Bundle up and save and get 20% off, plus free international shipping when you use code Colonello at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with promo code Colonello at manscaped.com. On March 19th, 2014, players noticed some strange activity with the Archer's Ring. Out of nowhere, it started dropping in price. First by a few thousand gold, then tens of thousands, and after a few hours, hundreds of thousands. Nobody knew what was happening. All of the other Dagannoth King's rings hadn't moved in price, so they knew something fishy was going on. Players came up with a number of different theories to try and explain the crash. The first one was that a giant merch clan must have been hoarding the Archer's Ring and decided to dump their massive supply all on the same day just to show their power. But with how much it was dropping, that just wouldn't make much sense. It had only been a few hours, and by now their value had already halved. The vast majority of players believed a different theory, that someone must have found a duplication glitch, but this glitch for some reason only worked on Archer's rings. Regardless of the actual cause, players' moods soon turned from concerned to full-on panic. As the hours kept ticking away, the ring kept plummeting in value. In less than a day, it had dropped in value from over 1 million coins to now just being worth 5,000. The Archer's Ring had lost over 99% of its value, but not everybody knew that yet. To avoid any market manipulation, the price of an item on the Grand Exchange updates very, very slowly. So, to an outsider, Archer's rings still appeared to be worth 1 million gold, but if they tried to sell a ring for anything even close to that, it would of course never sell. As the price plunged, scams would become rampant. Players who had thousands of rings that they had purchased for dirt cheap would walk up to wealthy players and offer them a deal. For example, they might spot someone holding a Zamorak Godsword, valued at around 3 million gold at the time, and offer them 5 Archer's rings in exchange. Unaware of the market crash, the Godsword owner might agree, thinking they could flip those rings for 5 million gold and earn a 2 million gold profit. In reality, however, they'd be lucky to sell them for 25,000. Things were so bad that Jagex decided they needed to issue a statement. Mod Tyrann would take to the game's forums to say that they're aware of the incident regarding Archer's rings, and have a team working hard around the clock to resolve this. Tyrann also asked players to not engage in mass trading of this item until further notice, and finally, that anyone found to be exploiting the Archer's Ring to gain a deliberate unfair advantage would have action taken against their account. Players found Jagex's wording of this post a little odd. As you know, the common consensus among the player base was that this was a duplication glitch, and Jagex just referring to it as the incident regarding Archer's rings left players very confused. Was it really a duplication glitch and Jagex just didn't want to say it yet? Or was something else happening behind the scenes? Well, they would have to wait a little bit longer to find out the truth. In the meantime, the ring would begin to stabilize in price a bit and start climbing again, but it would get nowhere even close to the million GP value it was at less than a day prior. Something I've yet to mention is the effect this incident would have on the Dagannoth Kings. Dagannoth Supreme is the only king that drops the Archer's Ring, and this ring was really its only good drop. It didn't have even a single other drop worth more than 100,000 GP. This was years before it would get a pet added too, so as a result of this glitch, there was now virtually no reason to ever fight Supreme. The kings had already been losing relevance as the years went by, and this would only accelerate things if the price of the Archer's Ring didn't go back up. The next day, on March 20th, Jagex would finally give the players details on why the ring crashed. Maud Jane would make a forum post saying that what happened the previous day wasn't a duplication glitch, but was the result of human error. She would go on to say that recently, Jagex had started a limited trial of returning items to players who have been hacked and had their items stolen. They had yet to speak publicly about this new program and had been rolling it out very slowly. When returning items to a player who had been hacked, someone on the team accidentally gave this player several million Archer's Rings by mistake. The player in question didn't report this mistake, and instead decided to dump all of them on the Grand Exchange at the same time. Seeing as how, at the time, RuneScape had an average count of around 30,000 players online at most hours, there was likely now enough rings in the game to supply every player with multiple copies. Jagex could introduce a second or maybe even a third ring slot, and there would still be a surplus. It's really no wonder that they crashed as hard as they did. But there was some good news. Maud Jane would go on to say that Jagex had luckily recovered almost all of the rings that entered the game. But here's the thing. Jane didn't define what she meant by almost all, and she never gave an exact number for how many Archer's Rings entered the game in the first place. So let's say 4 million rings were accidentally given to the hacked player, and by almost all were recovered, she means they removed 80% of them. That's still 800,000 Archer's Rings that entered the game in just one day. Now, with such a large mistake that caused so many bad things to happen, you'd think that Jagex would just roll the game back, right? Using backups of the game, they could just put everything back in time to before they accidentally gave that hacked player millions of rings. Well, it had likely been too long at this point. It had been at least a day since the Archer's Ring started crashing, so rolling the game back now would mean everyone would lose an entire day of progress, rather than just a few hours. Speaking of the player who Jagex gave all those rings to, what actually happened to him? You're probably wondering, did he get banned? Well, in a follow-up post, Maud Jane would comment that they don't discuss the status of individuals' accounts, but she did say this: the fact that they chose to exploit the mistake rather than report it shows that they did not have the best interests of the community at heart, but rather were focused on selfish short-term financial gain. So yeah, I'm gonna guess he got banned. This next part might not come as much of a surprise, but a few months after this incident, Jagex would pause their lost item restoration service indefinitely. They needed to go back to the drawing board and figure out a better solution. Meanwhile, for the next 7 years, the Archer's Ring would never pass a Grand Exchange value higher than 120,000 GP. That whole time, it would fluctuate between 25,000 and 120,000 GP. So why now, in 2025, does it sell for a whopping 13 million gold? How did it make such an incredible comeback? Well, in March of 2021, Jagex would launch the Rex Matriarch bosses, a sort of sequel to the Dagannoth Kings. One of the matriarchs, Rathis, drops an item called the Heart of the Archer. If you combine the heart with 10 Archer's Rings, you can create the Stalker's Ring. a sort of sequel to the Archer's Ring. Had this item never been released, I genuinely don't think the Archer's Ring would have ever recovered in price. And players to this day would still be asking, what happened to the Archer's Ring? Check out the video on the right about another big mistake Jagex made. In RuneScape's first year, players kept finding glitches that would let them kill other players in one hit, and despite Jagex's best efforts, they just couldn't fix all of them fast enough.